I love Lexus and I'm a huge fan of the Lexus IS. But with this third generation IS, I've got to say I am a little bit disappointed. You see, the second generation IS was well ahead of its time. It was a lot better than all of its competitors. It had way more features. It had like heated and cooled seats. The other cars only had heated 10-way seats as opposed to only 8-way or 6-way or 4-way or even manual seats. Infotainment was touchscreen. It had so many more things going for that car. And now we get to this generation, and as good as a car as it is, it's no way near as competitive compared to its competitors. So, how bad is this car really? If we look at the exterior of this car, I think this is just such a beautiful car. All of the lines, you know, it looks like it was designed by one person, rather than a lot of cars these days that look like there were 1,000 different engineers and designers involved, and it's not quite cohesive. Whereas in this car, everything looks just perfect. At all angles, everything looks perfect. On the side profile, you have this beautiful line across the bottom of the car that swoops up towards the rear tail lights. And it's just very striking. At the right angles, when the sun's shining at the right angle, it really looks quite striking. You know, the front, this is the first car, the first IS that had the spindle grille in it, and I think it really fits in with the rest of this car. Even though it was quite controversial when it first came out, I think people really appreciate this design a lot more now. The back's a lot more interesting as well. With the tail light design, it's got kind of a sort of a diffuser type thing. Looks a lot better than the previous generation's rear end as well. The side mirrors are beautiful. The shoulder line as well is quite wide, and when you open the door and you look down at the shoulder line where it meets the mirrors, it just feels a bit more muscular. So I think the exterior of this car is just stunning. I definitely think that the F-Sport package looks a lot nicer as well. Now, if we look at the interior of this car, it's definitely a huge improvement over the previous generation as well. I think, you know, one area in particular in the previous generation that has not aged very well is the center console area. The buttons there, the colors, just it looks very antiquated. Even at the time, I just didn't think it looked that good, you know. And I mean, even the clock, you know, the analog clock in this looks way nicer, way more up class. The overall look, the materials, the fabrics, everything is a lot nicer in this cabin. And I think the interior will last quite a while. Now the switchgear is better, but I still think, you know, it is definitely on the more entry level side of luxury. A lot of cheap buttons, a lot of the media buttons are just these really crappy buttons. They don't feel that great. And I think that's where I start to think that the European competitors have much better switchgear. The dials in this do feel quite good. The indicator stalk and window wipers, those stalks, they feel a lot nicer when you push them. One area as well which has been improved is the temperature. When you select the temperature in this car, the previous generation had these buttons, and buttons are the worst thing to use for adjusting the temperature, because you've got to keep smashing it like a million times to go between hot and cold, and normally you'd use a dial for that. Now, Lexus here has tried to kind of wow you with this kind of I can't remember what it's called, it's some electromagnetic thing. If you want to make small incremental changes to the temperature, you just tap on it. If you want to, you know, crank it up and crank it down, you just swap your finger up and you can go from quite a large incremental change very easily compared to a button. Now, in saying that, as cool as it is and as practical as it is, I still prefer a dial. Dials just feel a lot nicer. The way you can just feel them ticking through each temperature, each degree, it just feels a lot nicer using dials than that slide mechanism. But overall, the interior is definitely improved. One really easy way that Lexus could have improved the interior of this car is by using better speaker grills. They just look really, really cheap. And here's the funny thing. I would say they have the best sounding bass system in all of its competition, by far. These are the best sound systems in terms of what you get for a bass sound system. and there's nothing to show for it in terms of the aesthetics. They just look like cheap plastic covers. So now it comes with a subwoofer. It's an 8-speaker system. You've got a center channel. It's a pretty well kitted out bass sound system, and even the C-Class, the bass system only has, I think, 5 speakers and like no bass. So as much as the C-Class is probably better in many ways, the sound system in this is by far better. Now you can opt for a Mark Levinson 15-speaker 835 watt sound system. That's definitely a lot better than the factory than the bass sound system. But again, they don't have any fancy grills and all of that, and it's just a really simple, easy way to improve the overall look of this car in the interior. One of the areas that Lexus gets constantly criticized for, and it definitely includes this car as well, is the infotainment. And I don't think it's actually that bad. If you're gonna, if you're a journalist and you jump in this car for a day and you're out of it again, maybe it takes a while to get used to. But if you're buying this car and you're driving it, I found this to be actually pretty intuitive. I would not hesitate buying this car if you think infotainment's going to hold you off. It's definitely not that big of a deal as it's made out to be. The third generation comes with 2 different types of gauge clusters. There's the standard gauge cluster, which looks like your more traditional gauge cluster, and then there's the F-Sport one. This is one of the best gauge clusters that I've ever seen, especially in a time now where everything is going to complete LCDs and digital readouts and nothing's mechanical. And I think in my mind this is the perfect example of a LCD modern gauge cluster, but still with a very mechanical kind of feel to it. We've got all the basic stuff there, and I can use the D-pad on here to change through all the basic stuff that you normally can. But when you press this little button on the side here, we have another set of menus. And we've got information, which is all your normal trip stuff on the side. We've got navigation, and if I put in a destination into the GPS, then you'll see an intersection view and directions to your next intersection as well. So that is really, really handy. Then you've got your music as well, and lastly you've got messages. If I switch the drive mode selector to Sport, it lights up, and if I go to Sport Plus, it says Sport Plus. Now I just wish they could have done more with it. I mean, that's Sport Plus, that's Sport, it's the same thing, right? Just with the words changing. Eco mode is the same as normal, just with the word Eco mode there. I just don't know why, if you've got a completely full color LCD screen, why would you not take full advantage of it and make it look more eco-y and give it a different kind of readout? And Sport, I reckon, should be white, and maybe Sport Plus could be red or yellow or something like that. This is an amazing gauge cluster, but that's my only complaint, is why did they not make the different drive modes more visibly different? As well as that, you can see, and it's got a very nice intake noise as well. When you rev it up, you can see at a certain point where it lights up, so it goes red. I've made mine 3,500. It's a really nice sound there, as you can hear. So you can set those things up as well, and I've set mine to 3,500, and that's where it's going to turn red. So if you don't get the F-Sport package, you will not get this gauge cluster. So whatever you do, get the F-Sport model. Now the back seats of this car have been improved over the previous generation. There's a bit more legroom, a bit more headroom, but it's still pretty tight. Now my wife and I are pretty short, so if we're in the front seats, the legroom in the back isn't too bad. But if it's 4 full-grown adults, it's going to be tight. Now bear in mind that this is a compact car, so the C-Class, the 3 Series, the A4, they're all compact cars. Even the Audi A5 is quite nice as well, but they're all compact cars, and so they're all going to have tight space in the back. I don't think it's fair to overly criticize the back seats, because if you do want more adults to fit comfortably in the back of the car, then you should be buying a ES or a GS or some other mid-size sedan. Now, other than that, you know, you've got air vents down the bottom here. You've got your center armrest with cup holders in it, which is good. But it's still a little bit, if you compare this to the European cars, they've got a bit more going on in the back seats. And I think, again, what Lexus should be doing is they should be taking some of the GS, ES, LS features and bringing them into the back seats here. There's no 3-zone climate control here. There's no audio controls in the back here. There's no chargers in the back here. So I don't think the back seats have kind of aged well in terms of the features that you would get for rear seat passengers. One of the other things that Lexus should be doing in their cars, especially in their latest models that are coming out now and still don't have this, is interior lighting. A lot of competitors have interior lighting in them. The GS, which came out in 2013 as well, had interior lighting, and it was very basic. It was just one color, it was just white, but it really added something to the interior of this car. But this car has no interior lighting, and if you look at the 2022 model, there's still no interior lighting. There's no nice ambient, you know, colored lighting in this car, and I think it's those little touches that you can do to improve. One of the biggest reasons why you would buy this car over the competition is because of its reliability. Like any other Lexus car, it's just absolutely bulletproof. It's just basically a Toyota, a lovely, reliable, good old Toyota. There's not actually a lot of fancy stuff going on underneath the car. No way near as many things that can go wrong compared to its German rivals. And it's obviously well insulated compared to a Toyota as well. And I think if that's one of your biggest concerns, you know, if you can afford a premium car like a Lexus, but you're not sure about the reliability aspect of a premium car, this is definitely the car to go for. You might miss out on a few things, but in terms of reliability, it will not let you down. The third generation IS is really nice to drive. They've definitely kept that same smooth Lexus feeling which they have in all their cars. The engine is so soft and quiet. The transmission is the same old, you know, torque converted automatic transmission they've had in many of their cars, and it's very, very smooth at shifting. It's decently quick. Obviously it's not a dual clutch, but it's still respectable. If you do opt for the F Sport models, and I think if you also opt for the luxury models, I do think they do also come with the Sport Plus mode. And the Sport Plus mode gives you adaptive variable suspension and variable gear ratio steering. And you do notice that. It's definitely got a more rigid chassis as well. So cornering, handling, and all of that is definitely improved over the previous generation. It's probably faster than the previous generation around a track, but in a straight line, this is actually a little bit slower than the previous Gen IS. So unless you're dragging all the time, you know, you're probably not going to notice that difference too much, but you will notice the improvement in handling. Now, in saying that, it's still no way near as good as the Europeans in terms of handling and driving dynamics. It's just not as well balanced, and it doesn't corner anywhere near as well. But for the average person that's buying this car, I would say this is plenty in terms of the way it drives. The cabin is very quiet, and you do feel pretty well cocooned in here compared to a cheaper option of car. The seats in this car are okay. They're good kind of for your standard entry-level luxury car, but it's not as soft, as supple, or as comfortable as, say, the GS. Now, I know the GS is a more premium model compared to this, but I don't see why they couldn't just make the seats a bit more comfortable and give you a bit more adjustments. I wish there was better lower back support, and even with the lumbar support fully in, it's still not good enough for my back at least. So longer drives in this car, I find you do feel it after a while. As I mentioned in the beginning, in some ways it is disappointing when you compare this to its competitors. But if you're not really interested in the European rivals, if reliability is a huge concern for you, if you want something that's fairly simple, straightforward, but premium, that has a good ride comfort, that's got a fantastic sound system, then this is still going to be quite a good option for you. I would definitely recommend, if you can, getting the 3.5 litre in the F Sport trim. It just looks better, it's a fantastic engine and a fantastic drivetrain. If you can also get the Mark Levinson sound system, that will also help as well. But it is a good car in and of itself. It's just compared to the competition in many other areas, it wasn't as strong as it was compared to the previous generation. If you are coming from the previous generation and you liked what you had, but you just want something newer and better, I do believe you will be satisfied with this car. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more good car review content.